Many people have problems with art and not with reality.
So why is art different?
It's pretty simple, right?
This is knowledge, this is thinking, this is thought.
Yeah, it does something strange with your head.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair.
Bring it.
Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. My name is Ando. So, this week we have the second and final part of my conversation with Mikkel Bogh, the director of the Danish National Gallery of Art here in Copenhagen, also known as the States Museum of Art. As you heard in part one, he's an engaged and enthused director, and in this part you'll hear a little bit more about the challenges and compromises one must make in a position like his. He also has some really good advice for you young artists out there, so definitely stick around for that. What else is going on? These are grim times, gang. I can't really seem to shake what's going on out there. The Danish state looks about ready to seize valuables from refugees. This is perhaps the greatest embarrassment I have ever felt as a person partially of Danish descent. My prayer from my lips to God's ears is that the politicians look inwards and face whatever darkness is in their soul. They face it straight on instead of pointing it at the people who probably need help the most in this world right now. Did you guys read the UN report came out recently about Iraq, about the slavery of over 3,000 people by ISIS and the forcing of children into being soldiers? That's what these people are running from. So for the love of God, have some heart. What else? Oh, right. 61 people own half the wealth in the world. Is that what capitalism and democracy has brought us? Huh? I'm no bleeding heart liberal, and I'm certainly not a communist, but something is not working over there. At least we can hope those 61 people patronize the arts, right? All right. I'm done shitting on everything. There are positives. This show continues on. Mikkel was kind enough to share some time with me, and I get the privilege of sharing that with you. And if that wasn't enough, already next week we have another great show lined up, all for you. All we ask is that you share this show with others. We love shoutouts on social media, and we are working out a system of rewards for those who help us out. So, and it's a free show, right? All right. I'll shut my trap. Please enjoy the second part of my chat with the great Mikkel Bogh. Well, I mean, you're starting to draw a picture of someone who's not afraid of the challenge of hard work, and I guess that speaks to, people say that it's not a job if you love it, right? If you find the energy because you love doing it, it doesn't feel like work then. And then the fact that you're sitting there at 10 o'clock at night, instead of being in bed, you're writing a paper. If you didn't love it, then it would be terrible. It would be hell on earth. Absolutely. I do that not because people are asking me to do it, but because it gives me pleasure. It gives me a joy, a professional joy, and makes it worthwhile going to the office the following morning. Because you could say that research and writing papers and essays, for me, that's a constant reminder of what it's all about. Is it ever too much? Do you ever feel overwhelmed? Oh yes, it is sometimes too much, and then I try to gear down if it's possible. Whenever it's possible, I try to gear down. But yes, I sometimes feel it's too much, and oftentimes it's of course out of your hands and out of your own out of control in a way. But all in all, on an annual basis, it's there is a balance, also a work-life balance. But I would say that I couldn't have done this with small kids back home, and now my kids are independent. Or that helps. Yeah. But is that stress ever related to a sense of responsibility? Do you ever look at your position and think, oh my God, what am I doing here at the helm of this enormous ship?
I wouldn't say that I feel that I have a feeling of stress when I think of the responsibility. I acknowledge and I totally accept the challenge and the responsibility that I have as a director of the largest Danish art museum. But I also know the stress is merely a matter of time. It's time pressure, and that's probably also why it's not stress in the technical sense that I can't sleep at night. I still sleep like a child. It's not stress in the sense that I become sick. But sometimes I sleep. I don't sleep enough simply because I'm busy doing other things. But then, I have the weekends, so no, it's not the responsibility per se. It's more the amount of tasks and the many things that I involve myself in. Yeah. Often because I can't.
You can't help yourself.
I can't help myself. No.
Well, I mean, that's the best kind of person for the job, really. As much as it may feel like it's a little too much at times. I have the same tendency. I undertake too many projects because there's too much cool stuff to do.
Yes,
really, and this is our life, and this is what we have to do. Do you feel at all like? Like because of the fact that you're administrating, you're frustrated that you don't have enough time for curational work, for research work? Or I guess what I'm really asking is how much time do you have for curational and research work?
It depends, really. It depends on how I prioritize. You see, being a director of an institution this size, we are some 185 staff members. I have a sub-managerial level of 6 heads or 6 managers leading each their area: research, conservation, communications, mediation, and so on, administration. It's a big machinery. And even if there was 3 months before I began as a director, where the institution was run by those 6 managers without any director. There was a kind of acting manager or acting director, but that was the head of administration, and of course it worked. I mean,
the machine works.
So the machine works. It's a well-tuned machine, and even if I was in hospital or flew to the moon for half a year, there would be there would be a museum, there would be activities, exhibitions, publications would be published, and so on. And that's the funny and also as a director a little bit scary thing about it, that you know that in the long run an institution like that can't do without a director, because the institution would have absolutely no face.
Right.
There would be no direction, or there would be many directions. It would at a certain point come to a standstill. It would have a hard time developing itself and develop in international and national relations. There would be no fundraising, and so on and so forth. And you would need a direction, a kind of, what director gives is a direction. But it's running nonetheless. The machinery is running.
Which gives you some freedom to choose.
It gives me freedom. That was your question. Sorry. I have a freedom to pick the areas that I want and to prioritize. This area, it can do without my interference for a number of months or even years. Right. This area needs my close attention, so I'll delve into that, or I'll give it my full, attention for some time. It's not just a free choice, of course, but I can choose to, as I've done this summer and fall season. I've managed to curate an exhibition and to write a book that will come out as a kind of not an exhibition catalog, but it will accompany the exhibition.
What's the show?
The show is called Closer. Closer: Intimacies in Art. It tries to map the history of the representation of intimate space from around 1730 to the beginning of the 20th century. It's really a history of intimate space and intimate relations, intimacy as close relations between people, as relations between people, the way we relate to things that we are very familiar with, that we are related to in terms of body and mind, and intimacy also as the intimate sphere of the family relation between parents and children and so on, and how modern art from the early 18th century has gradually kind of absorbed this or turned its attention towards this new, historically new area that the intimate and private sphere is. So this is actually an old research area of mine, and it's an aborted research project that I took up again when I got the opportunity to make an exhibition. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it has been a fantastic opportunity.
And it's completely outside what you not need to be, but what you've been hired to do, right? It's not part of your job description.
It's technically, or strictly speaking, it's not part of my job description. But then again, my job description is very open, and leading a museum and making the museum what it is in terms of attracting the audience and inspiring the staff to make whatever they can, make their a great effort to develop the museum is a kind of open challenge, and there are many ways of doing that. You can do it on if you think that's the right thing to do, on a purely administrative level, and then leaving the inspiration, the direction, the strategic work to a kind of sub managerial level. That's what some managers do or directors do. You can also try to be an inspiration or set standards, and that's part of what I do, of course, in close collaboration with my staff. So for me, it's about being making the job as interesting for myself as I can, while at the same time creating the museum that I want it to be, and curating an exhibition and writing a catalog paper or a whole book, as I did this time. I couldn't possibly do that every year, but maybe every 5th year or every 10th year. I don't know what my time will allow for, but is from my perspective part of that job, making it interesting for myself, making it stimulating, but also being representing the museum as a actively engaged, professionally engaged director. So part of my job, I think, is also being the public face of the museum. So I actually take great pains being a public figure. That is not, like Vild med Dans or something like that. That's not really my cup of tea. But,
boo.
Come on. Next year you'll be there.
What do they call that show in English? It's
BBC, I think.
It's a dancing show.
A dancing show.
Where public figures dance.
Yeah.
It's probably not the best use of your time.
My guess is that you won't meet me there on the dance floor. But being a public figure, being visible.
Being an ambassador, really.
Yeah, being an ambassador. Yeah, right.
Is that part of your vision? I mean, are you able to say what your vision for the museum is for the next, let's just say, 5 or 10 years?
It's hard to be that specific, but yes, my vision for the museum is put in very general term is to make the museum a place to enjoy and get knowledge about art in the 21st century. But most museums would probably say that. So to be more specific, I would say that being a museum that has a 24-hour presence, that is not only present in the opening hours, which are getting fewer, I'm afraid to say, because of cutbacks, but also in after hours with an digitally accessible collection, a collection you can work with, where all the works, we have some 250,000 odd works in our collection, You can work with high resolution images, do with them whatever you want without any restrictions whatsoever. And a museum that not only feeds the audience with new knowledge about what's in the collection and make great perspectives and openings into that collection, but also an institution that receives from its audience new ways of looking at and dealing with and engaging in artworks. So a more dialogical institution. We are on our way, we are in process, but there is still some hills in front of us. And ahead
well,
of
you've
us.
done a lot of work also, as I was saying earlier before we started, with audience development.
Yes.
With trying to bring people in. Is that a specific kind of pet project of yours, the audience development and the relationship to the community at large?
I would say, yeah, it has become a pet project. It was there already. Many of the things I'm talking about, and I also say this in deep acknowledgement of my very professional staff's engagement in the museum, that some of the things I'm saying here, and part of my vision is a vision that's designed. It's not springing from my forehead. It has been developed by the institution, by engaged staff members, and my job is to synthesize these visions into a clear vision and to make it happen. And audience development is something I must admit I didn't know much about. Being a higher education person, audience development wasn't really part of my professional scope before I came to the museum. So I learned a lot, and there was a steep learning curve for me in terms of that. But I also felt a kind of natural, I must say, so spontaneous attraction towards audience development. Maybe I don't know really why, but it feels to me like not a totally new child that I haven't handled before, but like yes, of course, this is a natural thing to do.
All right.
This is a natural consideration. It comes like a part of the workflow that has become mine. So thinking research is not something totally different from thinking audience development. It's not like two different silos or areas that happen to meet on my desk. It's there are open doors between these areas: communication, research, conservation, audience development. I think working with kids and young people, I think this all this in a way comes together as not in one crystal clear vision, but these are areas that in my mind and in my daily work merge and are very that naturally converge.
Right. Well, on the ugly side, I'm sure the state also requires that you guys keep an eye on your attendance numbers. How many people are coming? How many, if less and less people came every year, that would be a sign of a problem.
Yes, it would. Yeah.
And that's both fortunate and unfortunate. I mean, it means that you have to think about exhibitions also as, will people be happy to see this, or will it only bring in the arts crowd? Yes. And the arts crowd, of course, wants something a little more edgy, a little more experimental. Yeah. But a Picasso show is going to bring in those numbers,
Yeah. That's one of the challenges or the balances you need to find as a public art institution today and as a museum. We have an obligation, and we have also a vision. It's part of our vision to reach as broad an audience as possible. Broad not only in terms of countries, but also in terms of social and cultural background, economic background. We don't want to be a museum for the selected few, as it was 50 years ago, or when it opened to the public 150 years ago. Almost 200 years ago, actually. We wanted to be a kind of a popular institution, but not popular in the sense that we are seeking the broad denominator, or that we are seeking to make blockbuster exhibitions that for at any price attracts the crowds.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So I totally acknowledge and understand and can without any trouble integrate into my vision the ambition to attract a broader public and to have growing attendance numbers, but it's also, or I would say it has to be counterbalanced by the other part of the vision, which is being a research institution, that compares itself with the best institutions in other countries.
That's absolutely right. To be internationally known, you have to be an international quality research center.
Yes, and that's also why I don't enjoy the competition of being the biggest museum or having the biggest attendance numbers. Sometimes we are being compared with Arras or Louisiana, which for a set of reasons have more attendance than we do. I couldn't care less. Yeah. I must say 700,000 at Louisiana, that's fine with me. We have 450,000. I think it's fine. Of course, we would like to have more, but I don't want to compete in audience numbers, because there are other things accounts for, or there are other ways of, what's the technical term for that? I'm thinking of accountability. Yeah. And there are other parameters of success.
Well, it's a completely fundamentally different institution. They are a privately owned arts institution.
Yes.
You are the state's stance. You're the state's archive of art.
Yes.
In a lot of ways.
And we have a huge collection. We have a huge obligation to communicate that collection, to develop that collection, to including making research in that collection. So most of my academic staff members have 50% or 30 to 50% research time. So it makes it into a completely different institution. We have a huge conservation obligation, and I'm saying obligation not in the sense that I feel my shoulders are weighed down,
right.
but it's part of the it's part of our vision as well, and to share the results of
right.
that. And I think it goes without saying, or it's in a way quite understandable that a museum like Louisiana that makes 7 to 10 or maybe even 12 special exhibitions, many of them blockbuster exhibitions every year, will have a higher attendance than a research-based museum that make historical exhibitions covering 700 years of art. But of course, I would love to have 1 million visitors a year, no doubt. But there are other things, there are other success parameters.
Sure. What about the role of the state? I mean, again, now you've worked for the state, both at the art school and now here at the museum.
Yes.
Are they giving you a lot of freedom? Or, I mean, because right now it's really, we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of problems with cutbacks. There's a lot of problems with politicization of the state's role in art. I guess it was always political, but I feel like there's been more peace at other periods in time with that part of the state. Now it's more up for public debate what art is for. I know recently there's been a series of articles about who gets state support. And is that for the people? This populism idea about support and all that. What's that like for you being in the middle?
It's a hard one, but I think it's a good question. Maybe I've been so many years in state institutions. I also include the university there, which is also a state university. So I've spent my whole professional life in state institutions. So maybe I'm like the tiger in the zoo. I don't know how the life is outside the.
Right.
But yes, I do know what you're hinting at, and I sometimes do feel that we are, for better and for worse, doing a state institution a politically determined or politically directed work, and technically we are. I mean, there's no way, there's no denying that we are politically steered institutions, and as a state institution reporting to the Ministry of Culture and to the Minister of Culture,
who changes every couple of years.
With a change that does not have any influence on the vision of the museum. But then again, there can be some. At every time we have a new cultural minister, there's a slight change of tone, change of interest that will affect us. And at least I will have a new boss every time, even though it's the head of the ministerial department. That's my superior, and not the minister as such. But no matter how you put it, we are politically steered, but we are also very free in that sitting in that ministerial framework. I mean, there is a fundamental freedom in having been granted as a director and as an institution the obligation to take care of and to do research in an old royal collection that was handed over to the state in the mid 19th century. There is a fundamental freedom in having, as a director of such an institution, 185 staff members doing basically what you want them to do. Of course, there are fixed tasks, goes without saying, but so I don't really feel torn between the you could say the political part of it, the state part of it, and the art part. There are of course some dilemmas, and there are compromises. You can't do whatever you like. But I must say, compared also to what I hear from colleagues in other countries, I think I have a quite big degree of freedom as an institution and in my position as a director of that institution.
I guess the biggest problem is money.
The biggest problem, the biggest challenge these days are money. You could say there is a freedom, even as a state institution, in being granted a still substantial state grant every year. Other institutions, and in the US, this applies to most cultural institutions. I would say every institution, apart from the National Gallery of Art in Washington, that they are not state funded.
That's right.
So they have to find all their money. But then again, the US is basically a philanthropic culture where there are many more means out there. The degree of, or there are more rich people, more bigger companies, and
There's
so on.
There's a tradition of supporting endowments and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just another boss.
There isn't so the waning of the welfare state, or the shrinking of the welfare state that we are developing these years in many European countries, and the transfer from a 100% state-funded situation to a partly state-funded situation is really, really hard. Because not only do we have to, as we cut back, we have to find other ways of generating revenue, and that's why we go to the state, to the cultural ministry, and say, will you allow us to take an entrance fee, because we have to make our own income now that you are cutting back. We have to think in more commercial terms, even if we like it or not, and we have to, in a way, develop a culture that's not yet there of supporting, of donating, and doing that is also working with the tax system, because it's also a matter of making it attractive to donate. So that's why the tax issue is such a big issue. The fact that so many people donate in the US is not only that there is a tradition, it's actually there is a tax redemption.
It's a write-off, exactly. Yeah. You get actually 100% of donations are exempt. And okay, that's interesting. So that's not the case here.
It's not the case for private people, but it's the case for companies buying art and foundations supporting. Maybe you have followed the recent discussions on tax, the tax rules or the tax law for foundations, private foundations.
I haven't.
No, the state, the annual state budget that has just been agreed upon has a kind of a follow-up of that state budget is a new law making it less attractive for foundations to support culture. Oh. So not only are we being cut in our state and in our annual grants as cultural institutions, there will also be less money out there in the private foundations that we are dependent on in the future if this law or this rule, tax rule, is changed.
That's really bad.
So we are being hit, on both sides.
Right.
Slash. Yeah.
I mean, because that's really problematic. Because I know I've talked to other people on this show who've been trying to develop a system of support. There's also that tradition for individual artist projects. But say someone like Jan Vo wants to make a large project, it's going to cost several $100,000. There's a tradition of private donations supporting projects of that scope as well.
Yes.
And there's been some effort here in Denmark to kind of bring that into the circle as another funding opportunity. And I think maybe it goes back to the fact that Danes are very used to the state supporting things, and that's where you go to get support. But that seems dangerous. I mean, you mentioned earlier you're a fundraiser, so is a lot of that trying to find private?
Most of our fundraising efforts go into raising funding from foundations.
Okay.
These, classical foundations based on fortunes generated by cigarette companies, things like that, Augustinusfonden,
right.
the Obelske Familiefond, all those, New Carlsberg Foundation, that's beer.
Right. And they're big givers.
They are big, and they were the first.
Yeah.
I think the first general culture supporting foundation in Denmark. So they have been an inspiration to others. But we are developing also in the light of these recent cutbacks, new support schemes for private enterprises. We are going into strategic partnerships, things like that. It's new for us. It's also new for the enterprises. So we have to develop to contribute to developing this culture of support of culture support, art support for the arts.
Right, especially if the cutbacks continue.
Yes.
Do you think they will?
I suppose they will. Yes.
It's been the direction for the past quite a few number of years.
And if you look to the UK, I mean, it's been a constant cutback since Thatcher.
Yeah.
Maybe even
Yeah,
earlier.
same with the U.S. basically.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier your role kind of internationally. How tight is the community of international museum institutions?
It's loose and tight at the same time. You develop friendships, you develop professional relations. Some of my curators have very close friendships. They may have done research together, collaborated in curating exhibitions and so on. On a director's level, there is a quite close community. It's not a family, because there are so many museums, and the international organization ICOM that organizes and set up meetings for directors and other museum staff members counts like 30,000 museum people.
That's
so
worldwide.
It's worldwide, and it's huge, and attending these conferences every second and third year is like attending big stadium rock concert or something,
Right.
So there are smaller communities within that large global community of institutions that work together. And in the Nordic countries, I think we have a quite intense small community of 4 national gallery directors that meet a couple of times a year. and we exchange ideas and talk about, personal and professional challenges in being director of a museum of that kind, and so on and so forth. So you are very dependent on these communities, and some of them are even personal close friends, and some of them are just professional friends. But these colleagues on different levels are extremely important. And they are also important in terms of making it easier for your staff members and curators to work together. If the directors are on good terms, it's much easier for your curators to work together.
Of course,
because it gives a support framework for their work, and this is in many respects very important. So that's also what I do when I travel around and meet. When I go to another museum, maybe to see a new exhibition at National Gallery, I also try to meet some curators there, or even to meet the director.
Well, you've been very generous with your time. I'll let you get out of here in a second. But I do want to bring it back all the way around from the top to, maybe the bottom. Are you also paying attention to what's happening at artist-driven spaces, at new galleries, at the bottom level where the students are coming out of the academy, the young people are starting things?
Yes, I am, and yet my time is limited. I would like to do it much more than I'm actually able to do it right now. I try to do it. It's typically on Saturday mornings. I go by bike around in Copenhagen and see small exhibitions and shows. And I think actually it's not just because I've been a dean at an art academy and have a kind of heart for that. And a passion for young up and coming artists, but also because I think as a National Gallery, you have to have an open eye in that direction. Not that we necessarily buy things from very young artists very often, but we have to be aware of the most recent tendencies. And I have curators who are aware, of course, but also as a director, I think it gives me a sense and a feeling of the art community around me, the lively. And sometimes we do even invite young artists to come and make performative guided tours, or to make interventions in the collection and so on. So and without a knowledge of that area and that scene, it wouldn't be possible for me to open my institution to that generation. But my time is limited, and it's all too often that I get an opportunity to see. I miss so many shows. Yeah. I know they're there, but and I try to come, but it's too often that I miss them.
There's a lot of spaces too. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's a very lively scene.
Yeah. Do you have any advice, kind of to wrap it up, for these young artists who eventually one day, hopefully, get their foot in the door, show with you, these guys and girls, of course, that you used to be the dean for? What do you tell them getting started?
It's not often that I have an opportunity to talk to all of them, especially since I left the academy. I'm afraid I don't have the attention, but now I think I would tell them never stop working, never stop, even though there are so many disappointments, and it's so difficult to make ends meet in an art world with little money circulating. It's extremely important that you just keep on working, have a daytime job and work as an artist at night, or the other way around. And if there is something you are proud of, something you want to show us, then come. Actually, one of my curators told me that she, being a curator or a keeper in the drawing collection, as a young curator, a lot of the young artists came to her, showed her portfolios and things. Young artists don't do that anymore.
They're terrified.
They are maybe terrified. They are shy. They are whatever. They should come to us more often. not expecting that we will buy or purchase their works, but just keep us informed of what's going on, especially those many interesting artists that are not in the big galleries and that are not being supported by galleries. They are kind of below the radar of institutions, of larger institutions, and it's very hard to get in touch with these artists. So come to us, send us material. That's my message.
I am fast. I think that's great. I think that openness is absolutely amazing. And that's also, you were open enough to come here. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for the invitation. It was a great pleasure.
All right, that concludes our talk with Mikkel Bogh. Thank you to him for generously using his time with us. And thank you to the institution he works for, SMK. And of course, thank you to you for listening and sharing this episode with your friends, families, and enemies. If you guys could do me one favor, I promise I'm going to do it too. Let's all just take a moment to write to our politicians and ask them to please not steal valuables from people who have been forced out of house and home and desperately need some help right now. I feel like that's kind of the least we could do. Right? All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Undergang Armchair. Intro and outro music was kindly provided by Johnny Ripper, and today's interstitial music was provided by Cesus. You can find links to their music and tons of other conversations with great people on our political ally of a website, undergang.net. The show is produced in part with the kind support of the Danish Arts Council. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back already next week.